Hi, welcome to Tech Beyond Gender podcast. I'm your host, Meena Satish Kumar. Today, I'm joined by Andrea Magnorsky, a principled programmer and software architect with over 20 years of experience. Andrea has led impactful projects across public and private sectors, co-founded Batcat Games, and created the popular bite-sized architecture sessions. She also runs a consultancy focused on strong typed functional languages and systems thinking in architecture. Thank you, Andrea, for joining us. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to having a chat and discovering what this is going to be like.
I'm just going to set a reminder for myself that I need to ask you about this bite-sized architecture sessions, what it is all about, maybe a little bit further down in our conversation.
For sure. Yeah, yeah. It kind of aligns with the whole uh, thinking in systems. So I think it's a quite natural thing to talk about, actually.
Andrea, can you start by telling us a little bit about your background and what led you into software architecture?
Sure. I think like most people that wind up doing software architecture, you need someone else to tell you, oh, you're doing architecture. I think that's the way you kind of realize you're doing architecture. You might have wanted to be an architect. Maybe you thought that you would study like and read architecture books, but it kind of happens when maybe one or more people are like, oh yeah, you're doing it now. So, just you can use that. Everyone knows you're doing this except you, maybe. So I think it kind of went that way. Also, depending where do you work, the 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 title of architect can be either extremely respected or extremely kind of nearly derisive, like, oh, we don't really want that. So it's a very strange role to fill. So the way I really think about it is that what I like doing when it comes to working in software is bringing clarity, making the things that are blurry and not very easy to think about kind of more clear. Like it's all about making it clear so we can all move together and build something that makes sense. And what that even means, like how do we make sense of a system? And I think in a way that goes from understanding what the system's purpose is to understanding what the system currently is doing, the relationship between the different components. Um, so I think all of that is kind of what I think of what I actually do when I'm working in software. What about you? What is your journey, Mina? I'm also quite curious.
My journey is quite interesting. My educational background was more towards marketing, and I have double masters in marketing and information systems. And then my first job was actually in a polytechnic where I was actually a lecturer teaching undergrad students research more on statistics and stuff. But then accidentally I landed up, and then it was going quite well. And then I was more into this academic research, and I had opportunity to do PhD and everything. And I just thought to myself, hold on, I don't think I want to do this for long. I decided to actually leave that job, and then I landed up in a temping job in a government agency. And that's when I got my first technology job in a data warehousing environment. But it was such a challenge for me. I was almost bullied there in that role. And then I just thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is really not for me. I really want to move away from technology. And I landed up more in the data space for a long, long, long time. And then a few years back, again, I got this opportunity to move back into tech. I was like, oh my gosh, will I fit in? Will I know what I need to do? I had all these questions, and that too in the infrastructure space. And I decided, okay, let me give it a shot anyway, and then landed up in infrastructure space. And then I noticed something strange. There were not very many people looking like me in infrastructure or security or in network. And
Yep.
that was a very interesting journey. And that's when I decided Oh, I wonder if there are other women around me who might be experiencing something similar to me, or is it just me? And that's when I landed up doing a research in New Zealand about this, and Tech Beyond Gender started and whatnot. And now we are talking to each other. So that's my journey.
Wow, I'm super glad I asked.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm in architecture now, and I love it. I love the fact, like how you mentioned, right? It's about providing a sense of clarity, and that's what I really like about this role, because a lot of the times I feel like things just have been set up for many decades ago, and people just do some patching here and there over the decades, and no one really understands the exact way of operation, why certain things are happening the way they are happening, and what can be done better to enhance it. Right? So for that, you can think about enhancement only when you really understand the current state. And yeah, so that's something that I really like, putting on the hat of an investigator and just digging in and finding out what's happening.
Yeah, and sometimes it's also about kind of replaying that. So it's about bringing coherence. So it's about bringing clarity and coherence. So it could be that you have certain parties and could be different systems or different groups,
Yes.
and you're thinking you just said something and said something completely different about the same thing. So either it could be that where we have an incongruent model, so the model is incomplete, or my model is incomplete, or something is incorrect, and kind of iterating over that and finding the missing piece. Sometimes it feels like you found the missing piece of the puzzle, but by just kind of digging on that. And sometimes people put that on like on people skills, and you're like, no, 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 this is not. I mean, it might involve talking to people, and it's not a crime to talk to people. It's something we should actually be good at. Um, but it's about understanding what was missing in the model and making it richer and more complete, so that when we're building on top of that model, then like you understand what it actually can do rather than what it's been doing so far, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I also liked what you mentioned earlier on about how there can be certain people who might think, wow, yeah, architects, we need you. And there are certain other bunch of people who are like, no, we don't need architects. We know how it works and we can manage our stuff, right?
Yeah, and I think it kind of comes down to their experience of architecture too, because it could be that they had some like some experience with architects that were quite disengaged, that got in their ways, and that didn't help them achieve their goals. It's like, oh, we need to ship something, soon. And the architects are like, oh no, that's wrong. And there was a kind of miscommunication, or the design didn't suit, or maybe it was like policy led, or basically there could be like many reasons why something could go wrong. And so those people experience architecture in a quite negative way. And who would judge them, right? I mean, it's like it didn't help them. They needed a design, and what they got is kind of restrictions. And sometimes maybe, and the restrictions can be good. It's just about understanding whether they work and why not. And in a way, that kind of sounds to me like communication breakdown, but it could be also a systemic issue, as in it could be that the roles are not fit for purpose. And again, debugging that problem is when it can get very fun. So, and I guess the other people that actually go like, yeah, architects work and I need to make it work. And that can also be they had maybe a better experience, or the system worked a bit better, in that I think programmers like the creative part of, like, most programmers I know that love programming still after many years. They love problem solving. They love you give me a problem and I will go away, with my team or on my own or both, and make some solution. But if the design is extremely prescriptive, then that's where it starts getting really um kind of like throwing sand at the gears of an engine. It starts just kind of going like, oh, this is starting to get uncomfortable, and how do we get it to be better?
Yeah. And also, I feel like going back to your point about how at times we can be perceived as someone as roadblocks in the way, right, by imposing restrictions. I often find it much harder being an solution architect because you also need to think about the enterprise strategy and see how that fits into the business problems, whereas enterprise architects could be just more one step higher, looking at things from a much more broader perspective. But us working along with the stakeholders, looking at a specific issue, just becomes too difficult, right? It's like finding a balance between making sure that we stick to the enterprise strategy, enterprise architecture, but at the same time, support the business in delivering what they want.
Yep. Yeah, it's bringing in the strategy. I think it's also about how much do you share? Like, so could you just say, here's the strategy, go read it? Most places you can. The
Yeah.
question is like, probably people do it or not, and that's a different thing. But I think it's about being able to say enough that it's like, okay, this is a thread you can pull. This is why we're trying to do this way. But also, I find that it's about sharing the why and kind of sharing the problem statement and trying to. I truly believe that people um, like creating solutions together, and that those solutions tend to be better with multiple perspective. Again, this is ideal in a team that is well formed, etc. Et cetera. So there's a lot that needs to be in place for that to happen. But basically, the more I can get towards that, the more likely I think a project is to succeed in delivering in a way that is sustainable, and you de-risk a lot, if that makes sense, because there's multiple people that can answer questions. There's when you're saying, hey, let's go and start working, people are already bought in because they were part of building the ideas, or at least there was some level of consultation and some level of, oh, did you consider this? It's like, oh, okay, how do we integrate all the knowledge of the current system so that we have least surprises, and that kind of stuff.
So, how do you manage when you are dealing with business stakeholders who could be quite resistant to architecture? Like they are like, okay, we know how to do it. We don't really need any architect to actually come and support us in this piece of work. But as a role, you have to be involved in it. You are the one who needs to make sure that it is all in line with what the organization needs to do. How would you deal with such situations with such
Well,
people?
this is in a way why I really like being a consultant, which is that when people call, basically when I'm there as a consultant, uh, someone in that org, or sometimes multiple people understand they have a problem that they quite possibly try to solve, and it didn't work for some reason, right? And so that's when I turn up there. So part of that is solved by the fact that I'm a consultant. At the same time, I have worked within organizations. Like I worked inside organizations too that were resistance to there were resistance to like some sort of level of work that I would consider architecture. And what I do is I try not to label it. I try to put it in terms of the solution I'm hoping to bring. So instead of saying let's design something, I just like let's solve this problem. Or instead of saying I'm going to use insert technique name, you just say what the technique you hope it would give to kind of first it removes the I don't know this framework, and oh, I don't know how to think about what if it goes wrong. Where if you're saying let's understand the system better with some diagrams, let's create some diagrams to like literally understand the problem better and start uh, plotting what the solution could be, so we're all kind of aligned. again, you're kind of trying to remove all the labels that could, especially if, for example, let's say you want to use domain-driven design, or you think that's the suitable way to go. That seems like an extremely high investment, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't use some of the tools of domain-driven design in some subsection of the problem. Like, so instead of saying we're going to use tools of domain-driven design, perhaps we're going to do, I don't know, impact mapping or domain storytelling. You just say, hey, let's draw the journey, and so that we all understand it. And just kind of, it's less for people that are not familiar, then it's a bit better. The good thing about having words like domain-driven design or is that for people that do have experience, that they can, it's a shortcut, right? So it's extremely context specific as to where and how you use which approach, I guess. Yeah. How about you? How do you deal with the no, we don't like architects?
Yeah, well, I am facing it now, and yeah, the only approach that I like, how, as how you said, right? It's just going back to what we think the problem is and seeing, like, okay, going back to the whiteboard and saying, okay, here is a problem, and how do we try and solve this problem? Rather than just say, okay, this is the enterprise strategy, and let's see how we actually come up with a solution to meet the enterprise strategy. That's a big no-no.
Yeah, there's people
Because
who are glazed over, they went to sleep and they're like, I'm totally listening. And they put those glasses with little eyes painted, and meanwhile I'm like, having a nice nap.
yeah. So it's just literally going back to, okay, what is the problem? And let's see what possible solutions we can come up with. Right? And also acknowledging the fact that it is not always easy to get to a target state that we all want to get to immediately, but just coming up with a clear pathway on how we get to the target, slowly but surely, and also making sure that the business operations are not impacted by that.
Yeah, I think also it's a way of, in a way, what you said just helped me think about the fact that um, you kind of want to set up practices, right? So sometimes it's about not just finding the solution and it's all completely plotted, and because systems are extremely dynamic, right? So if you have set some useful practices that stick, then it's more likely that the team can keep going. So you're saying we're going, somewhere over there. We're This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to fix this. This is how you see. This is some observability metrics that can be helpful, and this is why we're setting them up. And you kind of understand your system health this way, basically. And you could be using, say, ADRs or whatever it is that makes sense in your context. But if you set healthy, sustainable practices, I think that's where it goes from some starting point. You kind of first you have training wheels, and then the system, people start working together and kind of go like, oh, I can see where we're going, and then you kind of go like, right, you go on your own, and it's beautiful when people keep doing the things that you kind of started, and you see them getting the results without you. Like there's I think, especially as a consultant, but also when I'm inside companies, both ways is really it's a sign of success to me that the practices were the right choice. Like that's my green flags.
So, what do you call those practices as?
Oh, so for of late, I've been thinking a lot about decentralized architecture practice. So I totally understand and agree that having someone responsible for delivering something makes sense in a lot of contexts, and if not basically even more context. Someone that can see across, but that does not mean that that's the person that should make all the decisions about that, right? Especially the bigger it gets, the harder it is to kind of actually have context over everything. So there's a whole this kind of you can always zoom into more and smaller and bigger decisions. So Andrew Harmer-Lowe has been writing about the architecture advice process, and it's something that I've been tending towards without having a name for it. And then when I read his book, I was like, oh, all of this resonates strongly with me, because what you want is that people are not blocked by the system, but that they can move as fast as they can, and that anyone can make the change that they feel like they should. This is not anarchy. This sounds a little bit crazier than it actually is. So the way he's formalized it is something like this. Anyone can make a decision in a system as long as they get advice, not permission, advice from everyone affected by the decision and everyone that knows about it, right? So very simple in like basically easy to explain, not so easy to implement, but a lot of this architecture advice process leans on decision making and decision making using the decision records and supporting that with teaching people and also learning from the process of writing these decision records and including the advice. The way I've done it recently is by making sure that I support that practice by running like weekly meetings. It's like what decisions are happening in stand-up. People mention something, oh, we don't know what to do with this and the other. It's like, cool. Did you write the decision record for that? It's like, oh, should we? And it's like, well, we're trying to make a decision. The decision is non-trivial. It will have an effect. Think about it. In a couple of months, would you wonder, why did you do this? Yeah, actually, we probably would. Okay, cool. Sounds like we need to write it. And that becomes a practice. So suddenly it's like, oh, you have decision records, you have a forum where you discuss them. That means the meetings about those decisions are very detailed.
Mm-hmm.
They are, and they're also very focused. So people want to go off in some tangent, then they're like, blah, 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 explain the tangent, and you can clearly say, that's great. Sounds like a different decision. We need to make this decision. So the interactions become more like workshopy, as in we're all working on something, rather than here we are in this. When would I, this is time I would never get back, which is the feeling that some meetings feel like. And also in these decision record meetings, if you're attending but you're not, it's not your decision, you're also learning how to design a system, which is actually really important. It's something kind of good to understand how you disagree and reach some sort of decision making without, like disagreement is good. It's, I would say, nearly essential to making good decisions. But disagreement doesn't mean like I hate you and I never want to talk to you again, and I will kind of boycott all of your further decisions, right? So being able to learn this type of practices, and this is just an example of the type of practices that are basically people need to learn how to make decisions. It's not something that you just pick up out of thin air. So if you don't have practices that support it, then how are people supposed to learn? Magic? You just hire people that have experience? How does that work out? Because there's some domain knowledge that is inherent to your system. So, all of these little things.
Nice. How does systems thinking fit into the picture?
Well, so the thing about thinking in systems is that it sounds a lot more ominous than it really is. At the end of the day, all you're doing by thinking in systems is kind of thinking in a holistic manner. You're thinking about the whole system rather than being narrowly focused on something. You think about the fact that entities exist. That entity has, there's parts. There is interconnections with this, like the interconnections are really important. What are they? Can you be more explicit about them? And most importantly, this system has a goal. So when you're thinking in systems, you're basically using any techniques you have to kind of meta think about the whole thing. So we have really good techniques for, let's say, for example, you do something like a sequence diagram. You're trying to understand some interactions, right? So that's a good way to see some part of the system. But then you need to think, am I missing something? And also when you think about systems, you think about the system itself, and you also think about its environment and the fact that one will affect the other, but the boundary needs to exist, right? So all of this relates to well, systems like software systems, in that you think about, well, you have some problem, this problem that you're trying to solve, where is it in this whole software system? And it's what type of problem is it? What kind of interaction is affecting? So it's sometimes a little bit hard to pin down what is it that you're talking about, because because you're thinking of the whole thing. It's extremely context aware.
Yeah. So now when I'm listening to you, right, I just feel like, isn't this a common way of thinking when we are trying to solve a problem? Is this different to traditional problem solving or linear problem solving at all? What is systems thinking in that case?
Well, when you're thinking linearly, you generally kind of think a story, right? So a story like I don't know, the I don't know, the three piggies, and the wolf blowing on the piggies' houses, right? There's three pigs, right? So what the story is like, there's three pigs and they're afraid of a wolf. The three pigs, to solve the problem of the wolf, decide to build a house. See, we're doing step by step. One of the piggies is building a straw house, and the other piggy, I think it was a wooden house, and the third one builds a brick house, hopefully in a non-earthquake prone area, right? And then the wolf comes to the first house and it blows it off. The piggy manages to escape, and you know how it goes. But as you can see, there's this extremely linear, like we're breaking out the problem, good. Um, but the thing is, like, to see the story, you kind of need to get all the way to the end. It's you can't have someone tells you, oh, well, actually, have you considered the fact that building a brick house take a lot longer? What about foundations? And obviously, this is a kid's story, and we don't care about that. But the reality is that the brick house will take a lot longer. Um, so what about the time constraints? And what about the weather permitting and earthquakes? Uh, that's actually where you start thinking about. I haven't thought about this analogy before, by the way. But when you're trying to escape this linearity and trying to think about, well, actually, why is the wolf blowing? How can a wolf actually blow a wooden house? That doesn't make any sense. It's thinking about the whole picture and thinking about it all at the same time, rather than in a step by step. Because the thing is, a system is happening all at once, so it doesn't necessarily fall with stepwise. It doesn't mean that if you're thinking it's not an or thing. It's not like you're either thinking linearly or you're thinking systemically. It's more about, you could be thinking systemically as a zoom out, or when you're zooming into something and trying to see what's happening. And you could be using linear thinking to understand that in a more analytical way. But with systems thinking, you're trying to see more of the context, more about the relationships, more about whether you have captured all the components. And most importantly, if you understand the goal of the system, like the three little piggies is maybe the family is a system, the wolf attacking might be a system, building houses is a system. So which system do you care about? The forest is a system where the piggies and the wolf live in. Okay, this analogy is kind of crazy. But I think hopefully this illustrates this idea of with the system you're thinking about all the things happening at the same time and considering how it all gels together versus this stepwise approach. And in a stepwise approach, imagine if I told you the three piggy story and I was like, there was a wolf and then there was a brick house. And also we need to learn how to make houses made of wood. Also the wolf can blow really hard. And also the wolf wants to eat the pigs. The pig's name is John. Obviously, this story is completely incoherent and it doesn't help you in any way. But if you're looking at both pictures, maybe you get actually a much better, richer idea of actually what's going on.
I'm just thinking, like, would it be like, can you actually completely lose context that way? Because you can just, even in your piggy story, right? You could just start looking at things from all several different angles, and then you might just easily get into a rabbit hole yourself and just completely lose context. Okay, what is the problem I'm trying to solve currently, and why are there so
Yeah.
many other issues in all these other different places? It just feels like a dangerous territory to be entering in.
It can be, and you could get sidetracked, which is why it's so important. For example, what I use to guide myself is diagramming and modeling, or modeling techniques. This is why I like the tools, for example, of domain-driven design, or why I like having uh, enabling constraints, or why I use Python's architecture sessions, really, which is that idea of ways to give you a framework, either or a time to think. You could, for example, say, right, I want to learn about our systems in this time box. Why is that? Well, you kind of want, if you want to get an overview of something, time is a nice boundary, right? And you could say, right, we're going to draw the system as it is right now. And maybe we do it together, maybe I do it myself. Either way, you're kind of saying, I want to just put everything I know about this in this type of diagram. And obviously, the more you diagram, the more you model, the more it's easier for you to find the right abstractions. But working through that discomfort, the the finding those abstractions that are useful or representative is part of the. I think you get more comfortable with the discomfort as you're more practiced. Um, so that's what I do. My practice is about using known techniques to help me frame the focus of my thinking in systems, like meta thinking.
So are these techniques like published, like well-tested systems thinking, or like these are the techniques that you have come up in your years of experience?
Yeah, so there's some very not well-known um, techniques, like some of them, like for example, Donella Meadows in her book Thinking in Systems talk about um, the iceberg model. Also, there is some other techniques there about seeing the feedback loops, right? And I think those are useful in some contexts. Then you have all the enabling constraint techniques, and then also there's all the I kind of think that a lot of domain-driven design is quite systems thinking. Like I don't see how they don't help you not do that because you're trying to actually discover and design something. So I think a lot of the techniques of domain-driven design are also quite useful. And if you want to see some of them, you can find them by searching DDD crew. And there's like a whole set of tools that you can use from the beginning of your project or towards like any stage of your project. In the middle of that, I have also created bite-sized architecture sessions, which is in a way how I got to learn about thinking in systems. As in, I've been doing this, and then someone told me, well, you're doing kind of thinking in systems. You're trying to understand your system, which is meta thinking about your system, which is by definition what we're trying to do here. You're trying to understand your system, its relationships. Maybe you have a goal on what you want to achieve with these models. Um, so yeah, I guess those are my tools of choice.
When listening to you, I just feel like, okay, so systems thinking need not necessarily just be an application in software environment or building large scale software systems. Could just be me managing my calendar every day.
Yeah, I know, for example, there are courses for using system thinking in all kinds of scenarios. And again, Tony Meadows is one of the people that wrote about it in terms of policy. And also there's a book called Beyond the Limits, where they basically kind of try to understand the limits of the planet and why and how we should address environmental constraints. So thinking of our planet and the way we like plants grow, the way our economies function, et cetera, and trying to see like, well, what could work so that this is sustainable? Like, what does growth mean and why? And kind of looking at the way our system works and how could it be so that it's more sustainable, so that we have a higher quality of life? Like, what are the metrics we care about? What are our feedback loops? And yes, so I think it's a holistic, unsurprisingly, way to think about things.
Cool. Now, I'm just thinking about a problem that I have at my work, where I'm currently looking at seeing how over the
Yeah.
decades, right, we have come to a situation in an organization where we've created several different disparate data warehouses, databases, right? And some of them are in a situation where we don't really understand how certain variables are derived or calculated. It has gone through multiple transformations along the way, touching so many different data warehouses and data marts. It's just become unmanageable. So now we are thinking about, okay, how do we streamline this whole thing? So how do we actually start thinking about getting data from different host systems directly, create data products which the businesses can eventually use? So they know that, okay, I need data about customers, then I use this specific data product, and this will have everything that I need. And if I need to know anything about my staff, then I know, okay, there's a data product for staff, and this is what I will use for, and this is my product data product, right? So on and so forth. But getting to that situation, which is a target, is not an easy step when you've had multiple different warehouses, multiple different data marts, and you've had like cowboy data engineers been working with that for decades. Now, asking them to shift to something different is not easy, right? So, from a systems thinking perspective, how would you approach? Because you're also going to be dealing with a lot of business stakeholders who've been using this data for many, many decades, pushing back and saying, this works at the moment. I don't want to move. I'm not really interested to talk to you. How would
Yeah.
you approach that?
Well, I guess I will start with some questions, because it's like what I'm hearing is something like this, right? It's like, well, we have this system has grown to be unmanageable, and one thing that I particularly thought was two things you said. Well, I was like, oh, pay attention to this. The first one is like, we're not clear about where the source of truth is. And the other thing that I heard, again, sorry if correct me if I'm replying this wrong, is we are not sure how some like important variables are calculated. Like we lost understanding. So I'm hearing that and I'm saying, okay, what's happening is a lot of people don't know whether, I mean, they're relying on this data, but they have lost trust on how of the provenance of it. So that seems like one part of the problem. But really, what I'm more curious about, so for me, it's like this is things I would pay attention to. But what I'm thinking about as well is like, well, you need to choose the problem that you're trying to solve. It's like basically saying that the statement of the problem is it's messy, it's too wide. So I would start by trying to understand, especially when it comes to dealing with stakeholders. It's like they are gonna like some people are relying on some numbers, data, like I don't know, let's say it's like some source of truth for customer identity, source of truth that you said is a bank, right? So source of truth for, let's say, loan information and stuff like that, right? So I would start with the problem. What's the problem? The stakeholders will want something. What is it that they want? They're trying to achieve some goal, something that is kind of probably I'm gonna guess is something like we want some new feature. We want to be able to productize this data. Maybe again that sounds again like replaying something of what you said. It's like, well, okay, what kind of product? It's like, oh, some product. Well, we need to, what is the goal we're trying to achieve? So I will work backwards with people to find what the problem we're trying to solve is. And then as you're trying to reach goal, you try to build trust on, especially the two things that call attention to me, that the lack of source of truth is probably something that I would personally try to tread through, because if people are not sure about where this data is coming from, everyone is going to feel antsy, especially in a bank. The general approach here is finding the problem, like finding, and not finding a generic problem, but finding a very specific problem. Then also starting with what does the part of the system that relates to the problem actually looks like get clarity from probably bottom up. So you're basically having a two-pronged approach. You're doing a top-down approach, which you use kind of systemic approaches for, and then also a top-down approach where you're trying to really understand what is it that the systems that are related to your top-down problem are doing, and then threading through your worst problems that you know about. And again, I'm just picking up on source of truth for data, etc., etc. And you're trying to thread through solving anything that you know to be a massive issue, and see if you can do something to improve on that as you go, so that you can improve the credibility of your solution. One thing that I always try to do in any of this is try to find some signals. Like when we say the problem is something, you try to find what are good points, like things you can observe that will give you signals to your stakeholders, people involved in actually developing the system, and you, like what are all signals that tell everyone things are getting better. Or that things you can, and hopefully this is done automatically, right? So what you want is something that ideally is some sort of dashboard that you don't have to update manually, but if that's what you can do, that's better than nothing. Something that people can just go and check, are the lights on? Is someone home? Or is the building on fire, right? It's like, and ideally it's more on the lights are on and someone's home, that's a positive thing. Or if there's a fire, also that people know about it quicker rather than later. So again, this is my approach to dealing with a problem like that.
So, is systems thinking generally more time consuming than traditional thinking?
You know what? I think most people do think in systems at some level. So I'm pretty sure as an architect, you cannot do this probably already. What is good is to know that you're doing this so that you can formalize this a bit more. For example, I didn't know that I was doing it. And then I created this tool. I didn't even realize it was part of it, or part of something that could be considered systemic thinking or enabling tools like that. So that if you find tools, you can kind of streamline it. So I think really the thing you should be considering is like, you probably are already thinking in systems to some degree. And if you're not, it would be very useful because you will save time. And if you have better tools, you'll probably even be able to go more in depth in a more efficient way. So it seems like a non-zero sum game, right?
Now, with systems thinking, have you ever thought about how we can better understand and address like complex social challenges in tech, like lack of diversity or systemic bias?
Well, because again, thinking system is parts. relationships and their goal. So, I mean, obviously you can easily apply this way of thinking to, as you said earlier, any problem. So I think when we're building software, there's you have a system there's a software system, which is some compiled binary that is running on a server, and that's the live system. But to make that happen, there's a whole other system of humans and build systems and tools and social structure and also a country and so all of these things are happening, and in the end we have this software running in a machine somewhere, right? So when you're building software, that is a very important part of making the software system you care about, whether it is, a website for your cat or whether it's the TV, like, something like Netflix or a bank or anything, right? So to make a system, a software system like those examples happen, you have a system of people and code and tools all orchestrating together. So the parts are people, code, build systems, observability tools, etc., all working together with some relationship with each other with the goal of creating, again, Netflix, some bank, etc. How can you not think in systems when you do it all the time, right? You're working with colleagues and they do or not do something, and you think, oh, wouldn't it be better? This process that we're doing is so frustrating, or this process we use is really good. That's you thinking in systems. Do you see what I mean? So, for example, I think tools that help you remove obstacles and improve collaboration, I think of them as great for systemic thinking because it removes aspects of the process that slow you down. Slowing down is sometimes a good thing, but when it comes to so I'm sure you've been in meetings that you had that meeting like 4 or 5 times. You turn up to a meeting, you're supposed to make a decision about something, let's say feature flags, just to have some sort of topic. Today, you're there, we're talking about feature flags. Oh yeah, we don't know about that because, some problem and they didn't buy it yet. We didn't finish the agreement. You go, okay, well, in the meantime, we need to do something because we need to turn things on and off. It's like, yeah, we could do a Boolean flag in the meantime. Yeah, but that has its own problem. Oh, we run out of time. Let's talk the next week. And next week you have the same meeting. The following week, guess what? Something changed, but it's the same meeting again because you haven't made a decision. And so what if instead you kind of went like, we will not have a decision. We know now that that's something that is blocked. We have to delay that. Either we have a fake feature flag server that we manage, or we have this other thing. It could be like a config system, and that's not right, but maybe that's the options you do have, and you go with it until the finance for the feature flags product is unblocked. Anytime I see the same meeting over and over, there's some underlying non-simple social and technical issue there, and that's something that you might be able to unlock by helping people say, right, what if we could do the best thing? What would that be? And getting people to think in terms of like, right, that's not happening. Let's make something happen. What would it be? Let's do that. It's like, oh, it won't be perfect. No, but we'll stop having this meeting and wasting time. So that's sometimes enough. And it's about deciding whether that's actually what you should be doing. Or we can't do that. And so we stop having the meeting until the finance is blocked. But again, it's about being able to unblock on decisions. I think, I don't know, in the end, architecture is all about all these decisions, kind of one decision stack on top of the other. and what can you do with all those decisions that you've already made. So in your example, when you were like, oh, we have this problem, the system grew organically, we want to unlock from this mess and have something that is more streamlined. It's like, that's great. You still work with all those decisions that were made before. You need to kind of take those into account and see which bits of that you need to understand and take it from there.
Yeah, I am still not very clear about how we would address something like lack of diversity or like real systemic biases in society, though, with
Well,
systems.
that's because that's an extremely complex issue. You, me, and basically everyone that works in software. Let's say we limit this to the software industry in New Zealand, just to kind of have some sort of boundary,
Mm.
right? So we're in the software industry in New Zealand right now. It's we have certain capability to change the software industry in New Zealand, but we also are within the system. And making changes within the system is a lot harder than if you were kind of slightly outside of the system, or you have some sort of way to manage the system. I think the societal, and you know this as well as I do. If you want to influence change, making change happen and you're trying to make some meaningful change happen in 4 or 5 people, a lot easier. I'm not saying it's easy, but a lot easier than if you're trying to change 50 people, significantly easier than if you're trying to change 5,000 people. But basically, this difficulty of making change gets exponentially worse. And so, because you need to change the mind of how people consider and react to things. And sometimes the underlying cause is not actually maleficent. It's just sometimes historical or cultural, or it's always been this way. The way I like to think about it is something like this. You know when there's two. Have you seen kids like if they're 3 or 4 and they're fighting over something, and you're like, can you just get along? And the kids maybe fight, and you're like, take 5 and come back and shake hands and let's see how this works. And that sometimes work, but you're kind of trying to do that across many people that are not 4. They're not learning about the world. They have their own lived experiences and maybe they don't want to get along, and maybe they do. So it's easier to just get along because it's a very complicated problem, right? So what you can do, and like what we can do, is try to understand what's the problem and then doing everything you can to address it. And perhaps to people that don't understand the problem, it's their responsibility, not ours, to understand the problem. Because at the end of the day, you can't ask the people that are, it's like when someone crashes into, when there's a traffic accident and someone hits a pedestrian, you don't go and tell the pedestrian, what did you do wrong? Right? I mean, maybe they will ask what they were doing, what happened, but it's not up to the pedestrian to solve the issue. It's about the city perhaps having a better infrastructure. It's about like regulation about the cars, I don't know, having stop signs or having traffic lights. So it's a systemic issue in that you need to see the whole system and understand what's wrong. Not kind of go like, oh, pedestrians are all terrible. There should be no pedestrians. That's the wrong conclusion, right? Or there shouldn't be any cars. Either is good. You probably need cars or vehicles to transport things and whatever. And you can say, well, maybe you can have trains, and that would be a different system. That's kind of thinking in system. Think about the city. Think about the context and the how you make real what you want to see, and how the change needs to happen on the environment as well as within everyone's mind.
Awesome. Now, looking ahead, how do you see the role of systems thinking evolving in a world where AI and automation are becoming more prevalent?
That's an excellent question. And really, I think if anything, thinking in terms of systems is really one of the most, I want to say, stable tools that we have to kind of move forward. Some people might, so there's a few views that I see as quite prevalent in today's. One is AI is just one more change in tech, and you can think about it that way. Another one is this will change everything, and where there will be no programmers ever again. They're all fired, but there will be someone orchestrating these agents or something like that. If that's the case, understanding what the hell those agents are doing, and helping make reality the reality we want is again one of the best usages of your minds that you can do. Basically, assume that programming is not a problem anymore, but then you need to make the systems that you want happen. Guess what? You need to understand what you want. What are actually the things that we need they need these systems to do so that we can solve our problems. Again, this is thinking in systems is a good thing. And the third option is like, this is a fad, it will go away. Again, I don't think either of these three is the truth, but in all of them, understanding what you're trying to do, what's the problem, and what is the actual end result that you need in place. All of these are things that when you're thinking in systems, you're better off of than if you did. If you're just thinking in a very reductionist and kind of like, I want to keep doing what I'm doing way, I think it's just harder to really imagine the future. Again, this is three strong trends that I see, and in either of those, meta thinking, it's helpful because you can go, okay, let's assume that's true. What changes? How do you change how you act based on this theoretically new truth? And then you kind of go like, right, okay, well, that works for me or it doesn't work for me. What do I need to change if that's true? What are my observability points? Like, what are my signals that I can start going like, oh, this is more likely to become more truth. None of us know what will happen in the future. Like, if you think about your life, you told me a little bit about your journey. I'm sure that when you were doing all this research stuff, you didn't think in all these years I'll be an architect in New Zealand. Like probably that you didn't imagine that. I didn't imagine I'd be here 10 years ago, like doing this. So I think it's good to just keep your mind open and build models of what reality could be, and then see what signals are the ones that tell you what you can do next, and experiment and adapt.
Nice. So now, before we finish, I have some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
What's the one book or resource that shaped your thinking as a software architect?
Oh, as a software architect, I think it's gonna be Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. I didn't expect that to be the one, but I like it as it's just changed how I conceptualize things, like, and helped me formalize things that were intuitions at the time. So Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows.
Nice. Coffee, tea, or functional programming?
Ooh, it's all of them. I really like the three of them, so I can't choose. They're all my favorite babies. And cats.
Ah, so your go-to productivity hack?
Write it down.
Write it down.
Yeah, write it down. Try to come up with some mini plan. A mini plan before you do anything. Even if it's like a super broad draft, you're likely to do it better than if you didn't do that.
So you were in game development before, right? If I'm giving you a
Yeah.
choice, game development or architecture, what's more fun?
Oh, definitely architecture.
Cool.
Game development is really cool, but also it's extremely stressful, and also like the time constraints are very, very unforgiving, where architecture, it's a lot more like thinking is rewarded most times. Um, it's also stressful, you know. Apparently, I choose more stressful things as I go, but I'm having a lot of fun now. I feel like I found something that I really, really enjoy. I did enjoy that too, in fairness. So yeah.
Nice. So, if you weren't in tech, what do you think you'd be doing?
Oh wow. I can't imagine not programming, to be honest. Uh, I can't like I tried I kind of tried thinking about this multiple times because it can be frustrating sometimes. But I think if I could if I ran out, I'd probably do something with swimming because I love being in the sea.
Hmm.
But I think I love that that's a hobby rather than a job. It's something I do because I enjoy it, and a job basically working in something means you do it, and also you cannot do it even if you don't want to. Like where swimming, I think it needs to remain beautiful and special.
Cool. So, most underrated quality in a good architect.
Yeah, I think that the one of the best qualities is a listener, but I'm not sure it's underrated. I think it's the duo of active listening with excellent communicator that is like a chicken dinner for me. Uh, but I think active listener is something that I haven't always seen, and I think is the key to an excellent architect.
So, what's that one word you'd use to describe systems thinking? Just one word.
Meta, as in meta thinking.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks so much, Andrea, for your time.
Thank you.
You've been very generous with your time. Thank you so much. Any final
Well,
thoughts to our listeners?
I just really enjoyed talking with you, Mina, and I don't know your listeners, but I would love to. And so, uh, say hello, and I'd love to hear what you think, because communities are all about building those relationships, right? So, I love seeing what you're doing happen, and so, yeah, thank you so much for inviting me here.